Hello and welcome back to chapter Back to the Basics. It is now time to talk about entry and exit criteria and test closure. This is our last lesson for this chapter. Entry criteria. As it states, this is the set of generic and specific conditions required for permitting to go forward with a defined task. The goal here is to prevent a task from starting that would require more effort versus the effort required to meet the criteria that failed. As for exit criteria, as it sounds, it is the other way around. This represents the set of generic and specific conditions agreed upon with stakeholders for permitting a process to officially be marked as complete. The aim is to prevent a task from being considered completed when there are still outstanding tasks that have to take place. Please keep in mind that we also use the exit criteria in order to report versus it and highlight where we are and when we can stop testing. As a test manager, you should ensure that effective processes are in place in order to provide relevant information necessary for evaluating both entry and exit criteria for each test level and also report versus it. Make sure that during test planning, monitoring and control, you properly define the information required and methods for collecting these inputs. Make sure that members of the test team are responsible for these activities and are providing input in an accurate and timely manner in order to evaluate proper reporting versus the exit criteria. And as you already assumed, you are responsible for evaluating and measuring both entry and exit criteria. We talked a lot about the fact that we need to measure and report. But what should we measure? As an example, you can consider some of the below. Number of test conditions, number of test cases, or number of test procedures planned, test execution stage and how many passed or failed test cases for any specific point in time, total defects as grouped by severity, priority, or any other filters, number of change requests proposed, accepted, and actually tested, planned versus actual cost, schedule, or effort, number of quality risks mitigated and remaining residual risk, time lost due to blocking defects, also called blockers, state of the regression test, like number of regression issues, and so on. As you can see, there are a lot of items that can be tracked, and you should define them as per each test level and as per your product, project, or organizational need. The last stage that we need to perform for each test level is test closure. Unfortunately, there are situations where this is forgotten, but you should always have it. What happens here? Simple. We capture the key outputs from that execution and ensure that all work has indeed concluded. We also hand over any test artifacts and findings and proceed with lessons learned and archiving the results. The idea is to look for other opportunities when we can reuse them in later stages of the project or in different projects. Finally, it's time to put it into context. For me, the best example is again the payment system because we looked at it before and we covered test analysis, test design, implementation, and execution on top of it. I will pick the system test because this is an appropriate test level to illustrate a good example of entry and exit criteria together with test closure. So let's talk about the entry criteria for system test execution. This should consist of a checklist that looks at least at the following. Component integration test is complete, system test environment is ready, All test cases and conditions are ready and tracked in the test tool used. Test schedule and prioritization is complete and distributed to the team. Test data is ready and the test automation scripts are done. Keep in mind that we can have such criteria for any stage: analysis, design, implementation, but most often we find it within execution. Okay, so we covered entry criteria. Let's focus now on exit criteria for the payment system test execution phase. 100% of test conditions are executed. This means no unknowns. 95% or higher pass rate. In some cases higher, in other lower, but most of the time 95% is a common KPI. 0 critical and 0 high defects. Medium and low defects over this number, for example, let's say under 15, and all of them with a clear delivery date. We need to make sure that they are closed during the next test level, or to make sure that they have a workaround and are accepted into production. And as a final item for our exit criteria, 0 regression defects after running the test automated suite. Once the exit criteria is met, the system test is ready to be closed. It is now time to confirm that all test work has concluded and hand over the key issues, risks, and any other test artifacts that were documented during this phase. With this, it is time to conclude the first chapter of this training. I would always recommend that you cross-check any unknown term in the ISTQB glossary and always go through the syllabus, the videos, or my slides prior to the exam. If your results at the practice questions listed in the next lesson are not satisfactory, please go over the material again or consult the ISTQB syllabus and answer the questions.